Hello, all you freedom-loving people. Liberation Day came and went, but it left behind a long trail of reciprocal tariffs. And in the effort to level the playing field and root out corruption, Elon Musk is calling for some arrests. Okay, let's get into it. On Wednesday, President Trump announced his long-anticipated plan to impose his reciprocal tariffs on imports from dozens of countries. President Trump held up a long list of different percentages of tariffs that countries around the world would face under his new measures at the conference. President Trump says he knows a bunch of media and countries will start criticizing his tariffs, but he insists his policies are right.
In the coming days, there will be complaints from the globalists and the outsourcers and special interests and the fake news. The fake news will always complain. But never forget, every prediction our opponents made about trade for the last 30 years has been proven totally wrong. They were wrong about NAFTA. They were wrong about China. They were wrong about the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which would have been a disaster if I didn't terminate it. If I didn't terminate that, United Auto Workers, you would have had no jobs in this country. You would have had no jobs. It was all going to other countries. In my first term, they said tariffs would crash the economy. Instead, we built the greatest economy in the history of the world. And again,
President Trump said that he would impose half of the tariffs that other countries impose on the U.S. A few examples are like Taiwan. Taiwan imposes a 64% tariff on U.S. products, so the U.S. will impose a 32% tariff on Taiwan. President Trump also cited specific examples to endorse his policies. He said that the U.S. tariff on motorcycles from other countries is only 2.4%. Meanwhile, Thailand and other countries charge much higher prices, such as 60% in India, 70% in Vietnam, and even more in other countries. For hulled rice, the United States imposes a tariff of 2.7%, while India imposes a tariff of 80%, Malaysia a tariff of 40%, and Turkey a tariff of 31%. The reciprocal tariffs for other countries include 34% for China, 26% for India, 24% for Japan, 20% on the European Union, and 10% on the United Kingdom and Australia. President Trump announced a 10% base tariff on imports from all countries effective April 5th. With higher tariffs on dozens of countries with trade surpluses with the United States that the Trump administration considers the worst offenders on trade, but Canada is not listed, nor is Mexico. President Trump didn't impose new tariffs on Canada. However, the initial 10% tariff on energy imports from Canada, along with the broad 25% tariff on goods from Canada in relation to illegal migration and fentanyl trafficking, will remain in place unchanged. The current exemptions also remain for goods covered by the United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement, the USMCA Free Trade Deal. A senior White House official said that if the fentanyl and migration issues are resolved, then Canada would default to the new reciprocal tariff regime where USMCA goods would continue to have preferential treatment and other goods would have a 12% reciprocal tariff. Russia and North Korea were also not on President Trump's tariff list. The White House said that Cuba, Belarus, North Korea, and Russia are already facing sanctions which preclude any meaningful trade. But for Chinese exporters, the new tariffs are a fatal blow. President Trump singled out China in his tariff announcement.
I have great respect for President Xi of China, great respect for China, but they were taking tremendous advantage of us, and I commend them for that. I say, hey, if you can get away with it, that's okay. But, they understand exactly what's happening, and they probably, most of them are saying it's about time they did something, but, and they're going to fight, and they're going to fight fair. Everyone's going to fight. It's like, I say to the leaders, look, you got to take care of your country, but we have to start taking care of our country now. We can't do what we've been doing for the last 50 years.
According to the tariff schedule that was released by the Trump administration, a 34% tariff will be imposed on Chinese imports, but that's on top of the existing 20% tariff. This means that the actual tariff rate on China will be 54%. Over the past few decades, the belief in free trade has gained bipartisan support in the U.S. as U.S. companies look to build inexpensive and efficient supply chains overseas. And China is one of the largest sheep processing plants in the world. With the help of the U.S., China joined the World Trade Organization in 2001, and they gained greater access to the global market. However, Beijing has violated the letter and spirit of free trade rules by squeezing other countries' enterprises, by subsidizing their domestic industries, and using state power to force foreign companies in China to transfer technology. The U.S.-China trade deficit is rapidly climbing to over $500 billion per year. Cheap goods from China have caused U.S. manufacturers to face a surge in imports, leading to a decline in U.S. employment. However, the new tariff policy makes it difficult for Chinese manufacturers to enter the U.S. by relying on their low price advantage. In fact, in recent years, Chinese manufacturers have begun to relocate to other countries around the world in an attempt to avoid the impact of President Trump's tariff policy. For example, Chinese car makers have begun to set up plants in Mexico and Canada. But this time, the Trump administration has obviously done a thorough study, and they have blocked this kind of bypass export through a third country. Apart from Mexico and Canada, the other major destinations for Chinese manufacturers are Vietnam and Cambodia. This time, Vietnam has been subjected to a 46% tariff and Cambodia to a 49% tariff. So the advantage of setting up factories in these countries are very limited. And this will hit China's export competitiveness hard. So will these tariffs be passed on to U.S. consumers? It's hard to draw a conclusion on this one. When the Trump administration imposed a 20% tariff on China, big importers like Walmart already sent demands to Chinese suppliers to lower prices to compensate for the tariff. So which party will bear the tariff may depend entirely on whether it is a buyer's market or a seller's market and whether there are substitutes for the product itself, but it's difficult to draw a uniform conclusion. Asian equities and foreign exchange markets fell on Thursday, and U.S. stock futures moved lower in response to President Trump's announcement of reciprocal tariffs. Tokyo's Nikkei 225 was down more than 4% at one point. South Korea's benchmark Kospi fell 1.5%, while Hong Kong's Hang Seng Index lost 1.4%. Australia's S&P 200 index fell 1.3%. In the U.S. market, the S&P 500 futures fell 3%, and the Dow Jones Industrial Average futures fell 2%. Even though the tariffs are reciprocal, some analysts say that the scale of tariffs faced by Asian countries is larger than market expectations, which may have an impact on regional economic growth. The tariffs in both Europe and Asia were much higher than expected. As a result, Asian currencies will face selling pressure. After Canada and Mexico, Asia has been the most affected region in this wave of policies. In response to the reciprocal tariffs of President Trump, several countries have announced plans to reduce or eliminate tariffs on U.S. imports. On Tuesday, Israel announced the cancellation of all remaining tariffs on United States imports. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu stated that this move is intended to strengthen economic ties with the U.S. and to lower living costs in Israel. Vietnam also outlined plans to reduce tariffs on several U.S. products. This includes liquefied natural gas, automobiles, and ethanol. The tariffs on American liquefied natural gas will decrease from 5% to 2%. On cars, it will drop to 32% from a range of 45% to 64%. And on ethanol, it will drop from 10% to 5%. India is also considering cutting tariffs on over half of U.S. imports, which is valued at $23 billion. This is to protect its $66 billion in exports from the impending U.S. reciprocal tariffs. Ongoing negotiations with India indicate a willingness to significantly lower or entirely remove tariffs on many U.S. goods. This is dependent on the U.S. agreeing to exempt India from reciprocal tariffs. Swiss Economic Affairs Minister Guy Parmelin also emphasized that Switzerland has eliminated industrial tariffs. This will allow almost 99% of U.S. goods to enter the country duty-free. This move is part of Switzerland's effort to avoid tariffs imposed by the U.S. under the new policy. On Tuesday, Elon Musk publicly slammed fake non-governmental organizations, the NGOs that receive federal funds. He accused the organizations of severely abusing taxpayer resources and for participating in a massive money laundering scheme that is manipulated by political powers. He also called for the arrests of the heads of these organizations. Musk said in an interview with The Five on Fox News, with respect to non-governmental organizations, these sort of fake NGOs, I think there needs to be a number of arrests. There are people from both parties involved in this issue. Musk said, these are fake charities run by mostly Democrats. There's sometimes a little bit of Republican in there because they sometimes throw the Republicans a bone to say, hey, be quiet about this. So that's where you start getting the uniparty thing going on. Uniparty is a term commonly used to suggest that two parties ostensibly operate as one party. They share similar positions on government operations, fiscal spending, and foreign policy, but they take different sides on issues such as abortion. Musk compared the operation of these NGOs to money laundering. He explained they give these billions of dollars to NGOs run by Democrats that then go through a whole network of additional NGOs. It's a giant money laundering scheme. Really, at this point, I think the word NGO and money laundering are almost synonymous. Even though Musk has no law enforcement powers and cannot directly order a criminal investigation, his status as the richest man in the world and his current position as a special employee in the White House give him enormous influence in the public opinion. Musk said, "The wheels of justice turn slowly, but surely I have a maniacal sense of urgency." While Musk did not specifically name any particular NGO or person in charge, there have been recent cases that have raised concerns. Environmental Protection Agency Administrator Lee Zeldin tweeted last week that the DOJ FBI are investigating a $2 billion environmental grant awarded last year by the Biden administration to a consortium of organizations that are linked to former Georgia Democrat gubernatorial candidate Stacey Abrams, who advised on the effort to win the funds. Ever since President Trump said that Elon Musk would go back to running his own company sooner or later, several media outlets have reported that Musk will leave the White House soon. Politico cited anonymous sources who reported that President Trump has told his inner circle, which includes members of his cabinet, that Elon Musk will be leaving his post in a matter of weeks. The article reads, one senior administration official said Musk is likely to retain an informal role as an advisor and continue to be an occasional face around the White House grounds. Another cautioned that anyone who thinks Musk is going to disappear entirely from Trump's orbit is fooling themselves. However, White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt said everyone was imagining too much. Leavitt wrote, Elon Musk and President Trump have both publicly stated that Elon will depart from public service as a special government employee when his incredible work at DOGE is complete. Before the White House explained this fact, Tesla shares rose 5% on the news that Musk will soon return to running his businesses. The White House is seriously considering an Iranian proposal for indirect nuclear talks. At the same time, the U.S. military has significantly increased its presence in the Middle East. U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth has extended the deployment of the United States ship, the Harry Truman aircraft carrier in the region. Also, the U.S. ship, the Carl Vinson, which usually patrols the South China Sea, has also been redirected to the Persian Gulf. This will result in a rare two-carrier presence that is aimed at deterring Iranian aggression. The U.S. military has also moved 6 B-2 Spirit stealth bombers to the Chagos Islands which is a UK-controlled island. The bombers rest at the Diego Garcia military base. These high-tech planes can carry bunker-busting bombs across Iran and could destroy its military and nuclear sites. The consideration of indirect talks came after President Trump proposed direct negotiations, but Iran rejected them. Iran agreed only to indirect talks, mediated by Oman, which previously mediated between the two nations. The Trump administration believes that direct talks are more effective. However, the administration is not dismissing either the Iranian proposal or the potential role for Oman as a mediator. Today, Russian Deputy Foreign Minister Sergei Ryabkov also said that Russia is ready to offer its help for the U.S. and Iran to reach a reasonable agreement before it's too late. Israel is also not ruling out a diplomatic path to prevent Iran from obtaining a nuclear weapon. Today, Israeli Foreign Minister Gideon Sa'ar suggested that indirect talks might be possible between Iran and the United States. Sa'ar said, "We don't hold discussions with Iranians, as you know, but they made it clear they are ready for an indirect negotiation with the U.S., and I will not be surprised if such negotiations will start." On Wednesday, the Foreign Minister of France warned that a military confrontation with Iran could become almost inevitable if world powers fail to quickly reach a new agreement on the nuclear program of Iran. On the same day, U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent told executives from major global banks that Washington is prepared to impose broader sanctions on Iran. Bessent called the global banks for their cooperation in ramping up financial pressure on Iran. As a result, the Chinese independent refineries, which are known as teapots, appear to be pausing new orders of Iranian crude oil. Yesterday at 11 p.m. local time, an earthquake of magnitude 6 occurred off the coast of southeastern Japan. The depth of the quake was 40 kilometers. The maximum magnitude of the quake reached 4 in Miyazaki City and other places. What's interesting is the Japanese government released its latest earthquake forecast 2 days ago. The forecast said that if an earthquake of around magnitude 9 occurs in the Nankai Trough off the Japanese Pacific coast, it could kill nearly 300,000 people in the worst-case scenario. This would be because of a tsunami and collapsing buildings. The Japanese government released this report because it was worried that the Myanmar earthquake that happened a few days ago would cause a chain reaction of earthquakes. The death toll from the Myanmar earthquake continues to rise. As of Thursday, at least 3,085 people have been confirmed dead. The Nankai Trough is a trough in the southeastern waters of Japan. Japanese disaster experts indicated that strong earthquakes in that area are cyclical. They occur every 90 to 147 years. The last Nankai Trough earthquake was in 1946, and it had a magnitude of 8. And it has been more than 70 years since then. However, in 1944, a strong earthquake with a magnitude of 7.9 occurred. Therefore, the Japanese authorities estimated that the chance of an earthquake of the same magnitude, if it happens in the next 30 years, has been revised upward from the original 70% to an 80% chance. If the earthquake occurs, a 7 magnitude, which is the highest level on the Japanese seismic intensity scale, is expected to be recorded in 10 of the 47 provinces of Japan. The government of Japan has been committed to disaster prevention measures for many years. This is why the number of deaths in this forecast is 25,000 less than the 2012 forecast. The death toll was so large because experts predicted that a strong earthquake would bring a tsunami. A tsunami of over 20 meters would likely be observed in a total of 23 municipalities in Tokyo and 7 other areas. A tsunami of up to 34 meters is projected to hit the city of Tosha Shimizu and the town of Kuroshiu. It is expected that the majority of people would die in such a tsunami. And that's a wrap for this episode. Thank you so much for your support of Front Page. Please remember that every like, comment, and share helps more people to see the truth. If you haven't already, please subscribe. And if you have already subscribed, we thank you, but please double check to make sure that you're still subscribed, because some of our audience have reported that they're somehow unsubscribed without their knowledge. We've also heard that many of you don't get notifications of our videos anymore on YouTube. So when you do subscribe on YouTube, please make sure to tap the notification bell as well. Okay, this is our show for today. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you like what you heard today, please don't forget to like this video and share with your friends and family, because everybody deserves to know the truth.